Welcome to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael Neece, president of Our Future is Kind, and your companion in conversations about kindness, leadership, connection, and courage. Each week, I sit down with thoughtful leaders, creators, and bridge builders to explore what a healthier, more humane future could look like, and the choices it takes to build it. These are honest conversations about purpose, culture, curiosity, and what it really means to show up for one another at work, in our communities, and in everyday life. Along the way, we'll unearth practical ideas, small but meaningful acts, and questions worth sitting with, because building what's next is a choice. So let's dive in. Dr. Jennifer Fraser is an award-winning educator, consultant, author, and researcher who studies the lack of kindness in organizational structure. She's authored several books, including The Gaslit Brain and The Bullied Brain. And she and I are also co-authors on the forthcoming book, Our Future is Kind, The Ultimate Guide to Making a Difference. Jen Fraser, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here, Michael. Great to speak with you, especially about kindness and our writing project.
Yes, absolutely. Just so happy to have you here. We have so many things to dig into. You have credentials, so you have this great training. Can you tell me what is your training in?
I am one of those people who didn't know who I wanted to be at a young age. And, I wasn't the person who at 12 decided I was going to become a medical doctor and never looked away. I'm the absolute opposite of that. So my problem was I didn't want to eliminate interests. I didn't want to block them and laser focus and do what you're supposed to do and pursue a career path. So I just kept opening the door wider and wider. So in my academic work and training, what I did was, it's called comparative literature. And comparative literature really means you don't know who you are, what you want to be, or what career path you're on. You are instead keeping all your doors open. So it's a model where the goal of it is, in academia, which is very unusual, the goal is exactly that. To take discourses out of their expertise, out of their narrow focus, out of their silo, put them into the arena and see how the conversation changed. So what I do is, in my first book, I took all kinds of anthropology and psychology and social science, and I put it into the arena with initiation and with writers. I was curious, how does a reader of culture, which most of us are, how does a reader become a writer of culture? And I mean, that's an interesting thing for you and me, because we're working on this book, and it's a book about the future. It's trying to imagine something different, which is what writers do. They don't just tell you what's happening in culture or report culture, or, act as a journalist around these cultural events have happened. This was said, this was done. Writers are trying to say what could be, what might happen. Why should we think about something different that hasn't been imagined? So, this is throughout all of my work, that has been the constant theme, is not closing doors, opening them, working in an interdisciplinary way to try and advance a healthier, happier, more high-performing future.
So teasing apart everything from the plot and characters and motivations and trying to figure out how all of this can be put together in real life. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I know that your writing has been in several different places. I understand that in addition to 5 academic works, you also have some thrillers that you've written.
Yeah, I went through a phase where really, I worked with a literary group. I was working in an English department with absolutely fabulous teachers who were also creative writers. They were poets, they were novelists, they were just the short story writers. They were absolutely fabulous, and they were my colleagues. And so they said, you should join our writing group. And I was like, absolutely, I would love to. Well, the first things I wrote for the writing group were essays because I had no idea how to write fiction. It had never occurred to me that I would create a character. This character would speak dialogue. I mean, it sounds silly because I've been reading all my life. I'm a great reader, but I hadn't actually ever written in that style. So it was a massive learning curve. But luckily, my colleagues, who are these fabulous writers, were very patient, and they mentored me really. And so by the time I got to writing these novels, these thrillers, I felt pretty comfortable, and I just became my storytelling self. And I really, really enjoyed it because, as you and I have talked about, academic work, nonfiction, writing essays, writing articles, writing books in that vein is a much more, I guess it's keeps very much at the forefront whatever it is you're concerned about. And even if it's something joyful, you're still concerned about it, or you wouldn't be writing about it. Whereas fiction, you just sidestep the whole world and you step into a realm of your own creation, and it's quite different. And I love it. I just feel I'm too responsible right now to write any more thrillers. I have too much work to do. But the second I retire, I will go right back to writing these page-turning, character-driven, psychological thrillers.
Well, it's so fun. The treatment of character, the idea of how will somebody's world that gets broken, how will they react? How will they then overcome? Before we got onto this recording session, you mentioned that you have a really cool writing method. Share that with us, because anybody who's listening in and wants to know how to write their first book, how do they do it?
I think my brother's an excellent writer. He's a screenwriter. And I think I learned this technique from him, and it really revolves around walking. So what you do is you do that brainstorm, that horrible, I'm faced with a blank page, my head is full of ideas, and you have to coordinate head and the physicality of actually writing. And I would recommend to people on a brain level, if you bite the bullet and take pen and paper and start that way, you're going to have a much bigger rush of ideas and excitement and flow than if you are typing on a laptop. Now, I am absolutely passionate about my laptop. If I didn't have it, I would not nearly be as productive as I am. So I'm not saying it's a negative. I'm just saying when you begin pen and paper, if you look on a brain scan, the entire brain lights up in the process of pen and paper. It's remarkable. And when you're working on a laptop, you aren't activating multiple regions in the same way. You're activating some regions, but it's not like pen to paper writing. That is a whole brain different world. So you start with that, and you just let the inner sensor go. It doesn't have to look good. But I mean, so many of us were trained in school that, handwriting was, the glimpse into our soul. And if our soul was messy, then this would be a shameful thing indeed. And that's all just ridiculous. It's really for you. This is your brain and body talking to each other. This is your mind and your heart and soul and everything on the page. And it doesn't need to look good. The grammar doesn't need to be correct, and it doesn't need correct spelling. None of that. This is for you. And it's an important experience. Once you've done that, then you go for a long walk. And you let the ideas percolate, and you get the physicality that you need. You get oxygenated blood pumped up into your brain. You're not sitting, you're not crunched, you're not cowering. You are your big, strong, striding out in the world self. And then once you've experienced that, you come back and you pull out the laptop and you start to be more organized in, okay, I can look at my piece of paper. I see what I care about. I know what I want to write about. Let me use this more thoughtful, intentional, organized self to try and say, this part is really about the reader. How can I share with the reader what's happening in my own mind and heart and soul? And then it becomes a dialogue.
How did you learn so much about the human brain? Because, I mean, a lot of the writing process is caught up in the self-judgment and then trying to, improve something. And, is this even the right thing to write about? But then there's also, you clearly care about other people and teaching them how the brain works. So how did you learn so much?
Well, I mean, I'm a researcher by training. So it was hammered into me doing a PhD that your own opinion is a lovely thing indeed, but it is not what you're writing about. So I learned that if you haven't read everything about the subject that you want to, speak about, then you're not really doing your job. So I naturally default to research. So when I started wondering about what does this mean on a brain level, which was a question I was asking myself that I think many people have asked, my response to that was to do a deep dive into the science. And I'm not a scientist, so it was particularly painful to learn what I learned because it doesn't come naturally to me. I had to overcome a lot of barriers to understand what actually was known by a scientist. So, and I'm certainly not, I'm not able, without the training, I don't think any of us are able to read what Dr. Michael 𝐟𝐸𝐺 calls the deep science. We just can't operate on that level without the training. It's like I couldn't go and be a neurosurgeon tomorrow. But what I can understand, no problem, is the behavioral science by doing the work. And the behavioral science is enough, and it's oftentimes confirmed by the deep science. So when Dr. Michael 𝐟𝐸𝐺 read my first book that was a deep dive into science called The Bullied Brain, he's one of the world's leading neuroscientists alive today, most highly awarded. He got the Kavli Prize in 2016. His colleagues call him the father of neuroscience. He has over 100 patents. Like, he's an absolute full-on genius, this individual. And it was in many ways presumptuous of me to ask him to read the book to make sure I hadn't made any errors, which is what I did. But he talked about kindness. He's also the father of kindness, because when I kind of cold called him, asked him to do this for me, his big response when he heard my sob story about why the bully brain needed to be written, why I had done it, why I did the research, he just looked at me and he said, "How can I help you?" He's just the loveliest guy on the planet. Anyway, so he reads the book, and I'm like nervously waiting for his reply because it could have been scathing.
Right.
He reads the book and he writes me and he says, "The bullied brain is the most completely scientifically thorough subject on planet Earth." And so it was this, not that I'm a good scientist, but I could take the science, apply it to these normalized abusive behaviors that are rampant in our culture right now, and say, look, there's a disconnect between what the scientists know and what we're doing. And if we bring those two things together, we can have a much kinder world. So how did I go about the science? What happened was, and when I've been looking at the Future is Kind project, I see this pattern. One of my friends calls it crisis is corrective. So I came up against a major crisis that had to do with the brain, and it was my 8-year-old. And he was at school, of course, he's in grade 3. And the teacher called us and said to my husband and I, she wanted us to come in, which is never a good thing. We were like, oh boy, here we go. So he had been writing these tests on the books that the kids were studying. And instead of answering questions properly about what was in the book and what was happening and so on, these little grade 3s, he was making up answers that had nothing to do with the book. It's as if he hadn't read the book, which was very strange because he's a perfect reader. At 8 years old, he could read, a grade 3 book to you, Michael, and you would love it. But when it came to the test, he was making up completely answers that were divorced from the book. So she wanted him to get a psychological assessment, educational ed-psych, we call it in teaching, ed-psych assessments. Like, okay. So the assessment came back and it said that he was genius level for auditory learning. Like if you told him a story, he'd never forget it. And he had less than 1% ability to retain visual information. Now, anyone in the school system and in the career world, that's not good. That's not effective. I went to my colleagues at the school that I worked at and I said, what do you guys think? Don't pull any punches. What do you think about this? Is this bad news? And they were like, whoa, this is the worst thing we've ever seen. I was like, okay.
Oh, no.
Thanks, guys. So we ended up putting our son in the school called 𝐸𝐮&x. And 𝐸𝐮&x is not a regular school at all. It is a brain science school, and it is a program developed by Barbara Arrowsmith that strengthens cognitive deficits. So our son had a cognitive deficit in visual retention, is what they would call it. So watching my son for 4 years attend this really weird school, we were like, this is the weirdest thing. These are probably complete charlatans, but they're not. And so I started reading about Barbara Arrowsmith, and I started reading about the program and how it works. And then I just never stopped. So when I came face to face with a bullying situation, an abuse situation, basically, where I was working, I turned to the neuroscience because I had already spent 4 years watching it rewire my son's brain.
Yeah, when we are confronted with inputs, especially when they are negative, when they are, somebody is trying to bully you, they are trying to manipulate, control, they're self-aggrandizing or whatever it is. The way that I've always thought of kindness is as a data collection tool, right? If I'm kind to somebody and they're unkind to me, well, that's one data point. That's just one data point. So you do it again, you do it again. Eventually you have enough of a clear picture to know that you now need to avoid this person because they are toxic. But how do you think of a situation where there is a person who is bullying another, say it's in a workplace, and there's a supervisor who is very unkind to somebody under their supervision? How does that person now escape that situation or change it or see it differently so that they are okay?
I think that your method is the missing link for many people. What you just described is not at all what most people do when they come face to face with unkindness. They don't use it as a data point. They are not able to keep a strong barrier between themselves and their own thoughts and beliefs and intentions and what the other person is doing. They have a much more sort of a space that is you could perforated. You can get through it. There's a blend, there's a flow, there's reality exists between the two individuals. Whereas your model is much healthier. And if I could go back in time, I would spend a lot more time learning that method myself and then teaching it to other people. And I think it's absolutely valuable beyond belief. And certainly this should be a repeat lesson that happens in the workplace. When people behave in this way, it's just like if you saw, I don't know, a mouse or a rat or a cockroach, something that you know is toxic, that's not healthy, that actually, regardless of the size, shape, or form, or how it presents itself, it might look really cute. It can endanger you. We need to have that reaction to other human beings. Not to be untrustworthy, but just to be much better at collecting data about their conduct. Because I think what happens is, and this is what I try to teach people, is their automatic response faced with unkindness is to turn inward. They do an internal search. They go, what are the data points within me that indicate that I deserve to be maltreated in this manner? I'm going to improve. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to say to myself and create a simulacra in my brain that says, that's just so-and-so. So-and-so is under a lot of stress. So-and-so is so quirky. When she talks that way or when he does those things, that's just so-and-so. This is habituation, and it's one of the most dangerous things that our brains do. Nobody teaches us about it. So I love your method. I think that needs to be packaged up and sold widely.
Well, it just comes from my background in the sciences. When I was going through school, I was a physics major and studied all of the astronomy classes I could get my hands on. And it gives you a very different perspective. If you feel like you're sort of an alien observing Earth and observing the universe, it feels different. But when you are in a situation where you've seen the unkindness, to me, it seems okay to say, well, this person is in a hard season of life, or this person is just having a bad day, but not to excuse the behavior. I mean, how do you think of it?
The interesting thing that happened to me in my actual personal experience of dealing with it was, and this is what I think many people find confusing and really confuses their brain on a brain level, is that unkindness is often hidden and used in a much more manipulative and destructive way. It's not in your face. So what I what I really concentrate on in my work is the split personality, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Because,
Sure.
yeah, the colleagues that I was dealing with who were reported on by students, the students reported that they were abusive. And I had all kinds of interpersonal relationships with them because we were colleagues. So we were all teachers together, but behind closed doors, they became another personality. That if you had asked me, is it possible that these people would behave in this way? I would say, no, Michael, that could never happen. I know
Right.
these people. I see them every day. I see how they conduct themselves. They can't turn into someone else. No, that doesn't happen. And now I know that it absolutely does. It's exactly how these people behave. Once they have enough power that they can abuse openly and in public, and they're very, very good at making people believe that what they do is actually fine. And just as I described earlier, turn within and go, why am I so sensitive to this kind of language? Why do I react to yelling like that? Why do they look so unhinged to me in the way they're behaving, but everyone around me is not reacting? What is it about me? And now, these are all the ways in which these kinds of disordered brains are exceptional, that this is the world they deal in. So yeah, just to give people, if people haven't heard the expression Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, I'll just give you a 30-second
Sure.
understanding or insight into it. So I study abuse culture very specifically. That's a very narrow focus of mine right now. That's what I look at day in, day out. And I deal with present day cases as a consultant, or if I'm working with an organization, and I also read the research on it. So in the abuse world, you'll often see it used in the media. They'll talk about a scandal, so-and-so, a coach or a boss or a doctor, whatever it is, has been identified as abusive. But they come across as the good doctor. They are Dr. Jekyll. But when they, behind closed doors, they morph into this highly destructive, harmful being that is referred to in the literature as Mr. Hyde. And you hear the play on words. It's spelled Hyde, but really what you're meant to hear is hidden, hide. I hide from you, my true self, or my destructive self. And it comes from a 19th century Scottish novel called The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it was a novella, like an 80-page, psychological thriller about this type of split personality. So I think, it can be very difficult to identify Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde until it's too late and the damage is being done.
Well, one thing that just keeps popping to mind, I just might as well say it. In situations where there's an active shooter in a building, the advice that they give you is that you need to radically accept that this is happening, because it feels so surreal and unreal that people get locked into this sort of loop of thinking, this can't possibly be happening. I know that person. That person would never be this way. And they freeze essentially because they haven't radically accepted that this is going on and this is the behavior. Is that something that happens also in bullying? And is there a way to get past it and get to the radical acceptance?
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to think about it. So when I hear that description, what I hear is one of our most difficult things that all of us have to navigate. And it's very relevant to kindness, which is our automatic stress response. So much as we like to believe that we're in charge of ourselves and we control what happens and we're very intentional and we can work really hard to be that person. So we can do a lot of mindfulness training. We can do lots of kinds of training, mindfulness being one of the best ones, to address stress. So if I was in an active shooter situation myself, the first thing I would do is not in order to shut the loop down, which would be my body and brain having a full-on panic attack, is I would start to slow my breathing and I would start to breathe from the diaphragm. So one of the things you can do in a very visceral way is you put your hands right on your belly and you force yourself to make your belly rise and drop as you fill it with air. Because the second you do that, you're telling your brain, there isn't a predator here, I'm safe. And only when you are fully safe are you going to make good 21st century decisions around an active shooter. The brain is not, it doesn't understand the active shooter. It doesn't make sense to the brain. It understands a saber-toothed tiger or a mastodon or as somebody with a bow and arrow, but it's not going to help you make really smart, fast decisions with someone who's lost their mind and is walking around with an automatic weapon. So we're always having to bridge this kind of evolutionary system. And what you're describing, beautifully is the freeze response, of course, where the person just, your brain and body decide that plain dead. And we've all read of children who've actually done this. The shooter comes into the room and the kid plays dead. They'll lie with other children in their blood, and their brain and body are trying to save them, and they do it by just making them freeze completely, and the shooter bypasses them because they believe that they are in fact not there. This is, of course, not to get into horrible topics, but this is what rape victims do. People will be like, why didn't you run away? Why didn't you fight back? It's like, well, because my brain and body decided that playing dead was the most likely outcome to get me out of the room alive. Even in a courtroom, that's not taken seriously these days in the 21st century. So yeah, all of us, and the reason why I said about kindness and the way you were talking about colleagues and having a bad day, all of us have had our kindness go offline because our stress response has kicked in and we've yelled and we've been angry. And if we think of our own children, if people have kids or think of any family member who's made you mad, and they often make you mad because you're afraid. And when you're afraid, you become this big, huge, I'm an aggressive dog-like person. I'm baring my teeth. I'm growling. If I'm a cat, I've got my
claws out. Yeah.
Yeah, claws. I was going to say talons. I'm like, no, cat.
That's a big cat.
That's a really big cat. No, yeah. So I think that sometimes we can forgive ourselves and we can go and apologize when our stress response system's taken over how we feel and act and behave and made us be unkind because we're so stressed out. And this is adrenaline and cortisol, as you know, Michael. I don't have to tell you, but it releases in your brain and body and it makes you behave in ways that are self-preservation. They're there to survive. And we've all been there and it's all been horrible, but that's very different from the kind of toxic unkindness that certain people unleash on a regular basis.
Well, everybody has an awful lot of stress. I came upon, I go around a lake most mornings, and a friend of mine and we were walking around a lake one morning and we saw a couple, and it looked like they were arguing, walking their dog, and they were arguing. And then suddenly he put his hands on her and he pushed her aggressively a couple of times. And so I just ran toward them. Because, what do I have to lose? I'm kind of an old guy. I've lived a good life. So what's the worst this kid can do to me? So, but one of the things that he tried to say as an excuse was, actually, she said it on his behalf. She said, we're just really stressed out right now. And of course, I just tried to make the point, nobody wants you to be stressed out. I get that, but therapy is definitely worth your money, and putting your hands on anybody like that isn't okay. It's obviously just that's not how you're going to get a point across. And it's not how you're going to alleviate your stress. If anything, it's going to make things worse. So I have no idea whatever happened to that couple. I hope that they got the help that they needed, but, yeah, I've often wondered, was that the right response to go and intervene? It felt worse just walking past and pretending nothing had happened. That felt terrible. So running at them and then being in their presence, very much so, felt like the better move. But, as my friend said as we were walking away, gosh, I hope he doesn't decide that now he has to do this in private.
You can't win. If you had just walked by, you're normalizing the behavior, and the target of it, so the woman in this case, is going to say to herself, well, those guys didn't do anything, so I must have provoked this, or I deserve this, or these other men think that this kind of conduct is fine, and that does happen. The thing that makes me think of is all of these stories we've all had to read in the media lately about a father and son, where the son has pushed the father to his death on a cliff edge. This is like a big, huge company. Or the husband who's the dentist who's tried to kill his wife on a hiking path in Hawaii. It's like, really? Come on. Like, I don't know, but it's so indicative of people really in jeopardy, both people in jeopardy, as you pointed out. Like this doesn't work. One of the things I think about often is, so I wrote my first book on this kind of world of abuse and what does it mean on a brain level and so on and so forth, and was called Teaching Bullies. And it was looking at adults who teach bullying to kids and then tell kids not to do it. So it's this complete cognitive dissonance that happens in our youth. And, I think they think about it in similar ways that they might think about alcohol. It's like, when I get to be 21 or 19 or whatever the age is, then I can abuse people like these adults have abused me. This is what adults do. This is what I'm going to learn to do in my culture. And you see it everywhere. I mean, society, you turn on the news and you can see people with the most power and prestige ever being extremely unkind and highly abusive, and nobody's doing anything about it. So you can imagine how confusing it is. So I was looking at that concept of teaching bullying and then saying, don't do it. But the point of all this was to say, when someone is in that attack mode, they can convince themselves of anything. So if you look at society, we have convinced ourselves, many, many people, millions of people, quite possibly, in the supposed developed world, that physical corporal punishment of children is the best way to discipline them. This will teach them a lesson, and it's hard on us adults, but we need to do it. And so I looked at the legal precedent for this, and between 76 and 77 in the US, there was a case that went to the Supreme Court about corporal punishment in schools of students. And so I use this in my talks. I'll say to people, okay, look, if you saw two 14-year-old boys go up to a kindergartner and beat his legs black and blue with a paddle, and another one held the kid so he couldn't get away, is that bullying? Would you is the word you would use for that bullying, and would it have to stop? Everyone in the room, like, I have never had anyone dissent. Everyone in the room, no matter how many hundreds of people in the room, everyone agrees that's bullying and that's unacceptable. And so I say to them, okay, let's look at the adult version of that. You have this is 1976, 1977, in the Supreme Court right now. You have two adult teachers, and you have a 14-year-old boy, and you have another adult teacher who holds the boy. The two teachers beat his legs black and blue until he has to go to the hospital. The parents launch a lawsuit. It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court in the US. And the Supreme Court ruling is that you're not allowed to do it in prison. If you have an inmate, two guards, and a third guard, and do it to someone in prison, that is against the law. It's criminal. Can't do it. But, he ruled, it is not cruel and unusual to do it to a child when you're a teacher or an administrator in a school system. And therefore, that is the law that is still applied in 19 states in the US. And the whole history to this, this is my key point I wanted to make. When you strike someone physically, so that man is striking that woman that you saw, a teacher or a principal is hitting a child with a paddle, or a parent is hitting a child with a paddle, what you're damaging very specifically in the brain is the prefrontal cortex. And this is all documented in research. It's documented on brain scans. This is well known in the science community. It causes damage to the part of the brain that makes good decisions. So you are not at all helping a kid by ever hitting them with anything, from your hand to a belt to a paddle. It's not ever going to help the kid behave in the way that you want them to behave. You are specifically damaging the part of the brain that's going to give them the strength to make good choices. And, this is so indicative of the lagging relationship between science and law and behavior and understanding in our society. So that is my intersection.
It's fascinating, and I hope that the work that you're doing falls into the hands of more and more legislators who understand that laws need to be changed. My perspective raising three kids was always that if I hit them, then I'm teaching them that when they don't get what they want, it's okay to hit someone. And
Of
so that's a
course.
terrible idea.
Of course. It's, adults, really, all we ever do is role model for kids. I mean, we can say whatever we want, but they're really watching our conduct. How we conduct ourselves is the biggest lesson for them. And the more we learn we're never going to be perfect. There's not a parent in the room who's never lost their cool. It's but the difference being, of course, that's followed by an apology. I lost my way. I regret yelling, or even if somebody hit their child, I am so sorry I hit you. I was raised that way, or my brain is wired that way. Like you say, I'm going to go and see a therapist and really work on undoing that wiring. And what I think is so exciting for all of us adults is no matter what it is we're dealing with, that is something we do not like about ourselves. We know it's not productive. We know it's a bad habit, whatever it is. We have neuroplasticity until the last moment we're on the planet. So this is Dr. Michael 𝐟𝐸𝐺'𝐵, this 40 years in his lab. This is what he showed the world. He was up against Nobel Prize winning scientists that were his superiors when he was a young scientist. And they had said, the brain is fixed. It's done. 5 years old, 4 years old, the brain doesn't change. That's the years, the early years, the growth. And, the world has really cottoned on to that. We are much better with early childcare education, which we should be. Many people don't know that the brain changes until your last day on the planet. And Michael found it in his lab. And he was one of those sort of courageous, nonconformist scientists. And he experienced a lot of ridicule and being held back in his profession because he kept saying, I know they won the Nobel Prize, but they're wrong. They're wrong. The brain keeps changing. I can show you. And now he's one of the most honored scientists because he stuck to it. And he shows in his lab, and has for 40 more years, our brains can get stronger and weaker depending on what we do.
It's weird that science travels in those waves where you have to be pretty insistent about what evidence is showing, and sometimes for decades before you really get heard. But it's so good that he has done so. And I could talk to you all day. I have questions about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and why we do what we do. Those sorts of great questions, but I want to focus back on kindness. I want to dig really into that. We are writing this book together called Our Future is Kind, and the intent of the book is that hopefully the readers who get it will have sort of a blueprint of how to build a better, kinder future. When you think about the book project, tell me, why did you say yes? What are your hopes for the book? What are your hopes for our readers?
Well, I believe that the future has to become kinder. And I believe that it's going to take work, and it's going to take work on a brain level. So that's why I'm so invested in this project. And I'm a very collaborative person. I love to work with others. So being part of the team working on this project is my idea of dream work. I love doing this. So what I really want to focus on for the book and talk about and give as a series of strategies and tools to the reader is that many of us don't understand it is only something that I have learned by dint of not being able to figure it out and going to the research to figure it out. I couldn't understand. So if we go back to Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, if it is indeed true that we have empathy in our brain and it's a brain function, so our empathy is our ability to feel someone else's pain. We can experience their joy. It's one of our most advanced qualities and most important qualities in the brain. And it developed through evolution in order for us to survive, because human beings don't have talons or claws or sharp teeth. We don't have fur. We don't have feathers. We don't have scales. We can't survive without each other. We depend on other human beings to create community. And therefore, we have been a very successful species in survival. And so how do we do it? We do it through empathy. Our empathy is what gives us the impulse to connect, to feel kindness, to act on kindness, to build a world that is indeed kind. That's how we survive. So it's very interesting at this present turning point moment in time that we are tilting into a lot of unkindness, which is very concerning. There's a bunch of reasons why it's complex, but we are tilting we're at a tipping point, and we have to actively choose kindness in order to build community, civilization, and survive, and have far better lives. So I couldn't understand with Jekyll and Hyde. I was like, how can you be an empathic person with adults and turn that brain function on and then turn it off behind closed doors when you're with vulnerable people like kids? How do you do that? You can't do that, because you can't choose. That's like you can't choose whether or not you're going to have a stress response. That's the brain. Well, what I learned is, in fact, and this is the key component to kindness, we have two neural networks in the brain that are invested in empathy. We have cognitive empathy and we have affective empathy. Now, when you look at people who are unkind on repeat, they are what you described, Michael, as toxic. They are what I call the dark tetrad. They are narcissists, Machiavellians, psychopaths, and everyday sadists. And they do unbelievable damage when they are allowed to. They are extremely dangerous human beings. And they wear the mask of sanity. You cannot identify them. Anyone listening to this who says, I can't believe I fell for so-and-so and I didn't recognize it, and this harm was done, or this destruction over decades even, you are okay. None of us are good at identifying these people. They're very slippery. When you look at their brain, you see that they, on a brain scan, they have advanced cognitive empathy. That means they can read you like a book. They understand your feelings. They understand your intentions. They understand your thoughts. They know what makes you tick. The problem is with cognitive empathy is they use it to harm you and everyone else, and to control the situation, and to manipulate, and to rise up in power. They are invested in power. And so you are objectified for them. You are just a book on a shelf. You are just a clock ticking away. They don't see you as a holistic human being. They don't care about you at all. They'll do anything to you. That's cognitive empathy. They're good at it. They're very smart, very charismatic, very good with language in particular. Then you look at affective empathy in their brain, and the affective empathy neural network, and it's complex. It engages at least 10 different regions in the brain. It's eroded. Now, the really sad thing, and for all of us to activate our kindness, the sad thing is these individuals with highly insane brains, disordered brains, they have personality disorders that are very serious. They usually get there themselves from abuse and neglect. That's what erodes the affective empathy in our brains, abuse and neglect. So what is the strategy? What are the tools? The tools are to harness kindness from our very youngest moment on the planet to our very oldest moment in the planet. The antidote to much of this disordered mental collapse is kindness. And it's not expensive, and it doesn't need to be created by a pharmaceutical company. It's in us. And so I specifically went, I was asked to come and speak at a health and trauma conference in Europe. And I live on the west coast of Canada. So that's a big trip. And I was like, absolutely, I'll go, and absolutely I'll present. And the reason being was because Dr. Sue Carter was going to be there. Dr. Sue Carter is she's one of the world's leading experts, has researched it for 40 years on oxytocin. Oxytocin is naturally produced in our bodies and brains. Well, it's really our brains, but it can enter into our bodies and it can affect our health. Oxytocin is incredibly difficult to study, much more difficult than dopamine and serotonin and cortisol, the stress hormone. Oxytocin is a slippery thing in the brain, and it gets activated by vasopressin and blah, blah. It's very complicated for a brain scientist. Well, Dr. Sue Carter never gave up. And she is now able to show that not only does oxytocin release help with autoimmune disorder, some types of cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, etc. Not only that, but it's the healthiest thing in your brain. And guess what activates it? Kindness. Oxytocin is activated by the kinder you are, Michael. When you ran up to that couple and they said to you, oh my gosh, we're so stressed out. That means if we talked on a brain level, they could have said to you, Michael, our brains are full of cortisol and we're self-destructing and we don't even know how to interact together in a kind and caring way, even though we're a couple. That's what's happening to us right now. And what you did, we could say, is you entered into that and you released oxytocin in everyone's brain. You said, I am driven to go to you, strangers, through pure kindness. I'm putting myself at risk, but I'm going to you because my kindness impulse is not going to be stopped. And my oxytocin is alive and well in my brain. I'm a very healthy person, and I'm going to activate it in your brains. So I doubt they kept this kind of violent interaction happening. They stopped. And that's the switch from cortisol to oxytocin. So I want to talk to people about the different ways in which we can release our oxytocin.
So Jen, it feels like getting into truth telling, though, is a big piece of this, because you can't grow that affective side back and heal it without knowing what the truth is and discussing the truth. So how do you get to that so that you can have those conversations and yet keep them calm enough to have that conversation? I mean, do they need to be in an orange jumpsuit under armed guard in a prison? Or, I mean, can this be done in a more civilized setting?
You know, this is the question that comes up over and over again. I don't know in your work if you have come across research on people being rehabilitated who are in the dark tetrad, what the psychologists call the dark tetrad, the Machiavellians, the narcissists, the psychopaths, and the everyday sadists. I don't see research where these people get rehabilitated. I think it's pretty rare. I'm not sure people have, like the researchers have worked hard enough at it. It could be that, you know, these individuals are so difficult to deal with. And so, as you say, they're very manipulative. They don't operate in the world of truth. They operate in the world of control. They like to control the narrative, and they have no problem lying. They're psychopathic liars. They lie all the time. And in fact, in their brains, they don't get the alert from the amygdala that they're telling a lie and breaching a social contract like the rest of us. Like if you lied to me right now, you'd have anxiety about it. That's apparently or supposedly how the lie detector test is supposed to work. It's supposed to measure people's anxiety in their physicality, their physiology when they are telling a lie. Well, if you're a pathological liar, your brain and body don't register anything. You would pass that test with flying colors because you are so comfortable lying. Your amygdala doesn't go on high alert when you lie. It's just like, business as usual, taking control, manipulating people. This feels good. So, you know, all the mechanisms that we use with regular people, like, you know, to help them change their behavior, it falls flat with the dark tetrad because they don't believe that they are doing anything wrong. And they can convince you very quickly. It takes 25 minutes to half an hour for them to convince a psychiatric expert who's an expert in psychopathology that maybe it's them that has the problem. 25 minutes to half an hour across the table from these people. Yeah. So they are masters. I think we have to recognize how masterful they are, how dangerous they are. We should have laws that catch them early, which we don't. We let them abuse. If you look at, because of course I study abuse culture. So I study people like Dr. Larry Nassar. I study Harvey Weinstein, Jerry Sandusky, Mike Rice at Rutgers University. I study these people. I'm like, how is it that you could do this undetected through all of the layers and mechanisms and criminality? Like, how did you do it and not get stopped? And I mean, starting place is they are masters of what they do. And here's the really disturbing part. If you look at their brain scan and you see the eroded affective empathy, what you see is other parts of the brain that are very strong, that replace all the energy that you put into your affective empathy and that I put into mine, and our emotional centers, our limbic region. They don't do that. So where does all that brain energy go? Well, if they know where it goes. So if they put you, Michael, into a brain scan and they put Harvey Weinstein, let's say, somebody who's really is Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? They put him into, if people don't know everybody knows who Harvey Weinstein is, right? We don't need to explain that. Okay.
No.
Okay. So you put him into a brain scanner and you put you into a brain scanner and they show you all kinds of distressing images of harm being done. So the man shoving the woman, a woman making a man cry, whatever it is, an adult hurting a child, a teacher hitting a child with a paddle, whatever it is you want, bad stuff. you could not help it. Your brain would go on fire, and your empathy neural networks would light up, and your emotional centers would light up. You couldn't control it. It would go crazy. Now, let's go to the brain of Harvey Weinstein. What we would see is that Harvey doesn't light up in the affective empathy neural network. It doesn't light up. And even more interesting, the emotional regions, there's no lighting up, there's no activation. What they find is those brains light up in cognition, they're smart and charismatic and manipulative. And the other region that lights up is language. They are absolute, they're like sirens. They can convince you to swim out to the rock so that they can drown you. That's what they do. That's how they operate day in, day out. And so one of the things that Dr. Michael 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐠𝐞 has said to me that I never forget is that the brain scan doesn't lie. And these people are liars. So doing a psychological test with them is a waste of your time. They're going to lie on the psychological test. They're going to convince you that they're the healthiest brain on the planet. They wear the mask of sanity. We've known this since 1941. Dr. Herbert Cleckley's book, The Mask of Sanity. And since 1941, have we seen laws change to protect all of us, and especially kids, from these people? No.
There'd be some way of scanning ahead of time and figuring out if there's something to diagnose, and then keeping those who are vulnerable from that harm. I do, of course, my mind turns toward a future in which all people are cared for and cared about. And I wonder if there is some way to bring these, the tetrad that you had mentioned, if there's some way to bring them along, if there's some way to help them, if there's some way to heal them. Because when I see somebody who is being extremely harmful, especially, on a very public level, my mind always turns back to, I wonder what their childhood was like. I wonder what it was like when their father talked to them when they were 3 or 4 or 5. I wonder what it was like if they had abuse going on in their home that was verbal or neglectful or emotional or sexual or physical, any of those kinds of abuse. And I just think it's more than a darn shame. It's a terrible shame that we couldn't have helped those kids earlier so they didn't become the way that they are, right? Because they're going to pass that along.
That's the answer. This is a contagion. If we don't stop the contagion at the patient zero, it's just going to infiltrate everywhere. So the colleagues in my workplace, they had access to 100 kids a year, and they were highly abusive. So they're infecting all those kids with these really destructive behaviors. Kids will respond in different ways. Some will become addicted to self-medication with alcohol and drugs. Some will become massively insecure. Some will have psychiatric challenges like depression and anxiety, and some will do self-harm. Some will take their lives. That was the outcome of what happened. And so you answered your own question there, because the absolutely critical thing to do to create a kind future is to teach people that they, first of all, have neuroplasticity. So all of us can change our brains, no matter what's happened to us, no matter what trauma is being done, no matter what kind of an upbringing we've had. But our society doesn't intervene early and keep kids safe. It doesn't teach parents how to truly raise a healthy, happy, high-performing child. Parents operate under all kinds of myths that are inaccurate and false and destructive, and they think they're advancing and caring for their children, and they're actually hurting them. It's pretty tragic. We've known since the 1990s with a major American study. Most people will know it's called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And done by Dr. Bullied and Dr. Andan, one of the biggest shocks of that study was for them in the 1990s to realize how rampant child abuse is in the home. These kids are coming out, as Dr. Bullied describes it, their children are born with golden potential. By the time they've grown up to be 18, they've been turned into lead. He calls it reverse alchemy. We're not turning lead into gold in our society when it comes to our child rearing. We're turning gold into lead. How tragic is that? And it's so easy to fix. It is not difficult. It's about education. It's about care. It's about support. It's about leveling the playing field, giving educational opportunities to all parents, giving them the financial wherewithal so that they're not under excruciating stress because they can't pay the bills. I mean, if we're going to let people and encourage people to have children left, right, and center and remove any capacity to be able to perhaps save that child through an abortion or save the mother through abortion or save a history of suffering through abortion, not that I support abortion on any way, shape, or form, but I don't like the disconnect between you must bear a child. You have, led to this biological imperative. You must bear the child, and we don't care about that child after the day it's born. We're not going to marshal all the energy and resources and legislation and everything that we have in our power, and we have a lot of power. We're not going to make sure that you're healthy enough to raise a healthy, loving child who doesn't enter into the dark tetra. Sorry, you can't have the one without the other. That disconnect makes me crazy.
So many things to fix.
I know. But you know what? I mean, it sounds so simple that people don't believe it. What is the fix for all this? Lots more kindness. You're kind to a parent who's struggling. You teach a parent. They have seen in the research, you can take a mother who has a really bad attachment history in her own growing up, in her own childhood, and therefore she's playing out terrible attachment issues with her child. It takes 3 sessions with an expert, a social worker, a psychologist, 3 sessions for that mom to learn, the more I attach in a healthy, loving, kind way with my child, the healthier, happier, and more high-performing my child will be, the much less stressful my life will be. Everything is improved by being trained in kindness, 3 sessions, and then applying it. I don't see this as very difficult myself. I just don't understand why it's not happening.
More people need to know about it. I think that's part of the answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jen, I want to take a complete left turn here and get you into a thought experiment that we like to do on our Future is Kind podcast. So we're going to hop into a time machine, and I'm going to let you steer us 100 years into the future. And as you are at the controls, I say to you, Jen, the best part about our trip to 100 years in the future is that we did all the right things, did everything right. There's nothing we missed, and we did all of it. So when we step out of the doors of that TARDIS or that big time machine and we look around, what are you looking for specifically that lets you know we did all the right things and that it is the best possible future?
I think the key for me in that thought experiment would be that we walk out of the spacecraft and we realize that we entered into a world where humans have been taught that they shouldn't just lock themselves into the left hemisphere of the brain, that they need to always keep access to the right hemisphere of the brain. And many humans in our time don't know that we have brain lateralization. That means the 2 hemispheres of our brain are very different. And they're very different. They always are working together. They're never separated. They're always talking and connected and working together. And they share that. But we have a terrible tendency that has gotten more and more powerful in the last few years of locking into left hemisphere thinking. It's a very narrow focus. And in my book, The Gaslit Brain, this is the final chapter of the book. There's 6 strategies for this new world that we could enter in 100 years. But the best one, the most important one, is number 6, which is the brain lateralization chapter. And it's about the research on how if we get trapped in the left, and it happens it happens in scarcity, it happens under stress, it happens under fear. You turn on the news today and your entire system floods with fear because things are so dire. They're dire environmentally, they're dire in human interaction, they're dire in leadership. It's pretty hard to find any great stories that make you feel good. So you get a little trapped in the left. I call the left hemisphere of the brain the opportunist. And the opportunist feels like, I can't worry about anybody else. I don't have time for kindness. I got to take care of my family. I have to secure my career. If it means looking the other way when someone's being hurt, well, that's just the way it goes. It's a narrow focus. The left hemisphere is about grasping, getting, and feeding. And it's the only way we survive. If we didn't have that impulse, we wouldn't be here. So I'm not trying to say it's a negative, but we never want it to think that it's the whole picture, because it's not. So the corpus callosum is the part of the brain that connects these two hemispheres. And guess what? It gets eroded and demyelinated, the insulator that makes it a really good, fast communicator, like a light speed communicator between the two hemispheres. It gets eroded by abuse. And so you don't ever want to be in these toxic situations. You don't want your home life, your professional life, your political life. You don't want to be exposed to toxicity in human interaction, because it's eroding your corpus callosum. It's one of the most important things. It does lots of other damage too, but this one is important. So your left and right hemisphere, when it's highly myelinated, the corpus callosum, this bundle of fibers that allows them to communicate, you never get trapped in left. You are left and right all the time. Now, the right hemisphere of the brain, I call the altruist. It's the kind warrior. It believes in kindness for everyone. Every single human being you meet, doesn't matter how different they are from you, doesn't matter if they're in the dark tetrad. You believe that they need your best self at all times in all that. Not that you're going to expose yourself to danger, but you are going to care. You are going to usher in your kindness. You're going to operate from that place. The right hemisphere loves the planet. It loves the environment, and it knows that nature, our home, is one of the most important parts of ourselves, and we cannot harm it. It feels pain when nature gets hurt. A river being sullied, a tree being burned down in a wildfire, temperatures that are killing our birds and sea creatures. That feels like pain. It hurts your affective empathy. You feel the pain of the planet. If you're in the right hemisphere, it's the divine. It's where we see the billions of stars that are the night sky, the universe, and also our neurons. That's what our skull looks like. And that's what the right hemisphere knows. It's about community and civilization and connection and love. It is oxytocin city. That's what I want to see when I walk out of the spaceship. I want to see people, everyone who is operating with both hemispheres, completely alive and well and communicating and surviving as this species that could be the most wonderful guardians of the universe. And unfortunately, right now, is hurting all kinds of things in the universe on all kinds of different levels.
Well, I want to be in that future with you. So here's the tricky question then. I said we did all the right things. Jen Fraser, what are all those right things?
Well, as we've said, we start with early childhood education, and all parents, all teachers, all coaches, anyone who works with kids, they are being trained in this model of how to raise a healthy brain in a healthy child. So we do all the right things with the raising up of kids, and we really support anyone who struggles, because we know early intervention is the key to all of this. We don't let the contagion of abuse start to infect the little ones and the people that work with them. All through the school system, we do not teach children to obey. We don't teach them to comply. We don't teach them to conform. We teach them that they've been gifted with a unique brain. Every single kid sitting in a classroom or in their homeschool, every single kid has a unique brain. So the great journey through life is to help that child figure out what it is about their brain that has them here on the planet. What's its purpose? What is its contribution? Not how does it obey an adult figure at the front of the room that apparently has so much power you're not even supposed to question them. They have so much power they can tell you your value. Even though they can't see your brain, they seem to be able to be empowered by our society to rule on your character, your academics, your athleticism, your arts, and who you'll be in the future. That should never happen. That person at the front of the room that we call a teacher is a facilitator of the unique brain, and should be as filled with wonder at these remarkable 30 little people in front of them as they are about their journey with their own brain. That should be what's happening. Same thing in sports, same thing in arts, same thing in our careers. Every colleague that you work with, you should look at them and go, this person has 86 billion neurons in their brain, at least. That's the most fascinating thing I've ever heard. If they were going to have neurosurgery, the neurosurgeon would have to spend 8 to 13 hours mapping their brain because they've never seen one like it before. All of our brains are unique. That's the most amazing thing ever. So let's start operating from that place, not a projection. I'm going to tell you who you are. I'm going to use my words to tell you who you are and my behavior. I'm going to lock you into a category, which, by the way, is how the left brain operates. The left brain doesn't see holistic human beings. It sees categories. And that's why it's a dangerous way of seeing the world. It's great for grasping, getting, and feeding. Beyond that, you want to ask them right about the person you're talking to. You want to think about them as this unique guardian of the universe. So, I mean, there's just so many things that we could be doing. The criminal justice system has to be massively reformed. The laws have to be reformed. They're not serving us at all. And I'm very involved in working on that right now. We have we have a meeting with the Supreme Court of Canada because we're going to ask them to revisit child safety laws. They're working, they're not keeping kids safe, and that needs to be addressed. So they see 2% of cases and they reject 98%, and they've accepted our case. So that's really exciting. That's very positive for a future of kindness because, like you said, like we've been talking about, we have to protect the kids first, not let them get ill. Mental illness in youth populations, we've never seen anything like it. It means we're not going in the right direction. We have to be courageous and have to say and look in the mirror and go, we adults aren't doing a good job. We haven't put the right laws in place with technology to protect our kids from what the neuroscientists call brain rot. I'm sorry, how's that even allowed? Where are the laws that protect kids in the social media world? It's like these people are allowed to do whatever they want to kids. Really? When did that happen? Like, we need to change. I've been asked to speak at a conference in Pennsylvania in February 2027. The topic is we're going to call it the puppet master in the courtroom, identifying the manipulative litigant. And it's to teach them about gaslighting because they don't get taught the brain science on gaslighting, and they need to know it, these judges. It's a judges conference. All the trial judges of Pennsylvania will be there.
Wow. That's a great start right there. My goodness. I think that people really need to be able to get in touch with you, to follow you, to know more, to learn. How can people find you?
Well, like yourself, Michael, I'm a big believer in books. So if they really want to know this information, I write about it. My books are widely available. You can get them anywhere. If you get them on Amazon, The Evil Empire, you can write a review, which is what helps the algorithm find the book. So I would please write me 1 or 2 sentences, whatever you thought about the book. It doesn't have to be good or bad, doesn't matter, but they find books from your reviews. 1 sentence is going to make a difference if you want to help me get the brain science out there. So my website is bulliedbrain.com. My series I write for Psychology Today is The Bullied Brain. So you just look up Jennifer Fraser, Psychology Today, The Bullied Brain. I write all articles all the time about this brain science. So if you want it and you want to learn about it, those are quick reads, just 3 minutes. And you can read about all the different topics that might be relevant to your learning more about the brain science on abuse culture. And I also started in November when my new book came out, The Gaslit Brain. I started writing a Substack in that kind of new part of the world for writers. I write a regular Substack at least once, twice a week on present day in the news gaslighting, how it works, how we can identify it, how we can get a lot better at not falling prey to this manipulation. So yeah, those are the ways to track me down. And I have a contact form on the Bullied Brain if you want to actually directly reach me.
Wonderful. And I'm going to commit right now. I know you've already shared a copy of your Gaslit Brain book, but I'm going to commit to purchasing that and the Bullied Brain books right at the end of this. And I challenge everybody else in the audience to do that as well. Authors, when you get their book and get a couple of extra copies for family members who may also need this information, the purchases also help along with the reviews and the 5-star ratings and all that. So go do it right now because it's definitely worth your time. If you found this conversation as uplifting and as insightful as I did, go right now. So Jen, I can't wait for our book to come out, November 13th, World Kindness Day. We're going to have a big launch party, and your chapter in particular is one that I cannot wait to read. So
that is extremely kind. I've read about the other contributors and your work, of course, and I just think it's going to be a fabulous, uplifting, energizing, get everybody organized to start to work together. This is a big project. Going back to our earlier discussion around it, I think one of the things I've missed saying is this is not for a single individual. This is an absolutely collaborative project. We have to work together. There are power in numbers, and there's an awful lot of us who care about this. And that's what I most love about your project is you brought us all together. So we're all in dialogue. We're all going to be part of this launch and getting people galvanized. And that's exciting.
There is power in numbers, and there's also power in remembering, for those who are tuned in, you have power. Don't give it away. Don't let somebody convince you that you need to doom scroll for a few hours. Go take that walk that Jen was talking about earlier, and then come back and realize you can affect the future. So pick up your corner of the kindness blanket and help drape it over the rest of us, because we all need you. We can't do it alone.
That's the most important thing for everyone to walk away with from this conversation is the brain science is empowering. If you understand that you can work with your brain and you can change your brain and you can help other people change their brains. I mean, sky's the limit. We can do anything. That's what I love about neuroscience is it's like, if you look at psychology, which is so important, they look to the past to help us fix the present. And that's vital. Mindfulness teaches us stay in the present. Don't keep going to the past. Don't keep going to the future. Enjoy this remarkable world and moment that you're in right here, right now. It's a miracle. So be there, be present. We know it's incredibly healthy. But what the neuroscience does, which is what you're doing, and this is why you're doing it, is it puts your gaze at the future. You can look to the future and say the future is kind. And then just as you've done, Michael, let's reverse engineer and say, okay, the future is kind. And neuroscience tells us we can change our brains to make the future kind. What are the steps we need to take day in, day out, working together to actualize this? Because that's what brain science has told us we can do.
And that's what our book is going to help, start the cascade, of future building. So thank you very much for being part of that. Jen Fraser, thank you again for being on Our Future is Kind.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I'm very excited about the book.
This week's Kindness Challenge. This week, replace one moment of stress or frustration with a pause, a deep breath, and a deliberate act of kindness toward yourself or someone else. Want to stay inspired so you can stay kind? Jennifer recommends taking regular walks, spending time away from screens, and surrounding yourself with uplifting ideas. Reading books, learning new perspectives, and focusing on solutions instead of problems can help you stay hopeful. Most importantly, remember that your brain can change and grow throughout your life, giving you the power to build a kinder future every day.
You've been listening to Our Future is Kind podcast, where building what's next is a choice. Make your next choice a good one and help build the future we want to live in.